Teresa, would you mind calling roll?
Absolutely. Okay, Joycelyn,
Here.
John,
Here.
Steve Rolling, Brent,
Here.
Michelle,
Here.
Rita, and I see Ron, Charlotte, Yummy,
Here.
Michael,
Here.
Lori, Noel, Lori, Noel. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think our first matter is to approve the agenda.
So move.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have it's been moved and seconded that we approve the agenda. Is comment necessary? Discussion? No. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstaining? Okay, it's approved. The next matter is the consent agenda. And the items are either in the handouts or board docs. So if you want to take a moment to review that. Okay, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move, this is Michael, to approve the consent agenda.
I
Thank you,
second,
Michael.
this is Joycelyn.
Joycelyn, and it's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda. All in favor, please signify by aye.
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 Any opposed? And any abstaining? Good, it's passed. Next matter is preliminary business, awards and recognitions.
I don't know of any. Do you know of any?
Don't have any.
Right.
And there are no visitors here in the conference room. Are there any? Would Cody know if anybody is here?
Yeah, we don't have any who expressed desire to communicate with.
Sensible people. Next matter is our financial report.
Okay, at the end of the month, we have received total tax revenue of $58.8 million, which is about 4.5% higher than last year's. That's about $2.5 million more. The total amount of operating revenue is about $53.3 million, or 98% of the budget. If we look at county by county, we have received about 100% of budgeted revenue from Clay and Platte County. For Jackson County, we received about 96% of the budget. Well, had a clawback from Jackson County, that's about $278,000.
Yes.
Otherwise, we couldn't
I'm in
meet.
the meeting.
Next slide.
Hello.
Quan, I want to clarify that. You said that if not for the clawback, we would be right on it with Jackson County. Okay, thank you.
Jackson County.
Okay.
On the expenditure side, we spent about $22 million, or 68% of the budget for payroll and benefits. For library materials, we spent close to $7 million, or 60% of the budget. All other operational accounts is about $5.8 million, 57% of the budget. The total amount of expenditure is about $34.8 million, which is about 8% lower than last year's number. The next slide is the debt service. Right in the middle shows the total amount of interest from Bank of Kansas City for about $110,000. And the interest from the Texas about $3.4 million. And we received a reimbursement about $61.5 million, leaving a cash balance of $21.9 million. Next one is the capital project fund. Two projects. We spent about $1.1 million so far for Woody's historical home. And for capital plan, we spent close to $20 million. Next one is the grant and gift fund. We have about 20 active grants, and we received about $190,000 in grant funding, and we spent about $287,000 so far this year. The next one is the health insurance fund. So far this year, the total amount of contribution from both employer and employees is about $2.8 million. And the expenditure for medical claims, fixed costs, about $2.7 million. And also, at the end of the month, we have a fund balance of about $1.5 million. Next one, the last one, is a summary of the investment accounts. I believe the detailed statements are on the board doc. This is just a summary. We have two investment accounts. Under the capital investment, the total amount of market value is about $26.8 million. Average yield is about 1.17. For operating accounts, the total amount of market value is about $36.5 million. The yield is only 0.27. And will be matured in September this year. That's my report for the month.
Thank you. Any questions for Quan? I just had one. I was curious. If we're at 98% of the budget, is it expected that maybe through fines or something else that other funds will come in,
Yes, we will still continue to receive some amount of tax revenue,
late payments?
about $300,000 or $400,000. A little bit from funding, like the reimbursement for E-rate from federal government.
Perfect.
Final fees, very small amount, smaller than in the past.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Quan? All right, the next matter is our old or unfinished business committee reports. Building committee, Brent?
Good to be with everybody as we are able to gather. I'm going to kind of go through this in an expeditious manner. I think staff may have some slides that they want to share with us about some updates. Just kind of a heads up about what might be coming up, and we'll discuss it shortly. The building committee is meeting Thursday at 9 o'clock. We have an important discussion item. We've received our bids for the Lee Summit branch, and we will evaluate those. What I want you to be aware of is commodity prices are changing pretty quickly, and our design team and our construction managers are wanting us to, if we approve these at the building committee, adopt these and approve these and act on these Friday, Saturday by Monday, so we can lock in the prices. We think we have a good bid, and we don't want to let it get us away from us. Several new board members. I've asked Steve Potter to send out actually the drawing of the East Lee Summit, so you can sort of see what it is that we are wanting to build. Also a memo that describes our model, which is called guaranteed maximum price. The guaranteed maximum price means we won't pay more than that. And if we are savings, it comes to our benefit, but we want to give you materials. And as always, any board member and any member of the public is happy to attend our meeting Thursday if you just want to understand that particular project a little bit better, or the decision that you'll be asked to be making later on. Steve Potter has agreed to make himself available. Jake Weimer has agreed to make himself available. I'm available if you have any questions about the project. We want you to make not just a vote, but an informed vote really around Lee's Summit. It's an important, really, project for us, and we want to kind of act expeditiously. The second thing is there was on the agenda, a scheduled closed meeting. We don't need to have a closed meeting today. So it's anticipation of a possible property acquisition in Grand Valley. And that may be a topic of their building committee meeting on Thursday. I think that's what I would share by way of commentary. I think Steve and Jake may have some things they want to share with us about progress today. And then after that, I'm going to ask a special favor.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is if we can advance to the next slide, please, Cody. I'd like to just give you our general status update. So the next slide after that is our dashboard, or sometimes we call it the placemat when we print it out because it's the size of a placemat. And just a couple of key numbers that we always like to point out on the dashboard. The first one is, too many windows open. Okay, so a couple things that we want to point out is that if you look over at the sort of the second group of boxes, there's a column that says change. If you look all the way down at the bottom, it says 57%. So basically 50, and that's referring to the invoices. So 57% of all invoices and all due payments are complete. That's completely out of our hands. Now, one of the other things that I always like to point out is that if you look at the third column, there are a list of several project names which correspond with branch names. Some of them are black. If they're black, then that means that the project is completely done. That we paid every bill and it's all done. If it's green, it means it's somewhere under in process, but with J.E. Dunn. So J.E. Dunn's got it. And if J.E. Dunn has it, then that means that there's a guaranteed maximum price that's already locked in. So when you look at all of those together, it's over 80% of the projects are essentially dictated by guaranteed maximum price, meaning the bill is not going up. And if anything, we might actually get a rebate if it actually comes back cheaper. So we're around the corner. We've done quite a lot in terms of this. If you look at a few other numbers to look at on the placemat, if you look at the J.E. Dunn current column all the way there, it still says 84.5. That means that 84.5 is our construction cost. That's what we started off with, and that's where we still are. We have a contingency of $21 million, and then the numbers down below kind of show what bills are potentially still out there to pay and what we need, what we might potentially need to pay as opposed to what we have paid. So that's the dashboard, and I think the dashboard is showing that we are in a good shape. Oh, one more thing that I'd want to point out. I pointed out the contingency. If you look over on that table where it starts off construction, invoices paid, close in the upper corner, you can see that if you go over a little bit, it says land acquisition. And the first column was our budgeted land acquisition, 5.4 million. The next column is the amount that we have paid so far, which is 2.8 million. And so there is some savings so far. I mean, we haven't actually purchased all the land that we need to so far, but we also haven't used all of our budgeted funds for land so far. So this just a quick update on where we are in terms of the numbers for the project. If we go to the next slide, it's our it's our what's the status, and our what's the status report is always what we did last month, what we're doing this month, and what we're doing the next month. And keep in mind that because of this is the presentation that we put together for building committee, which means that they saw this in March, which means and it's almost a month old by the time we see it in this meeting. But with that said, if we go to the next slide, what we did last month, or actually what we did in February, South Independence branch was reopened, and the Grandview branch had substantial completion, both in February. If we go to the next slide, what we're doing this month, Grandview branch was open to the public in March. Blue Ridge branch closed the next day. And the Colburn Road branch, we had the punch walk where they basically walked through and found the things that needed to be corrected. On the Woodneath house, the wood flooring and plaster installation all started last month. So if we go to the next slide, what's going on this month. Colburn Road was substantially complete on April the 12th. And the Lee Summit branch is out for bid, as Brent mentioned. And we do have some of that information in. The Woodneath Homestead paint, trim doors, installed the fire shutters, and refinished all the wood floors, or we're in the process of refinishing the wood floors. And so that's where we are in terms of our projects. If we go to the next slide, I think we've got some images. And so I definitely wanted to share this one with you because this is the auditorium, and you can begin to see that we're finally getting structural steel. The other thing that's probably worth noticing is if you look on the right-hand side of the picture, the Woodneath house, with the shutters in place and all the tuck pointing and everything. Although it's not a picture of the house, you can see that the house is in good shape, at least on the outside. Still a lot of work going on the inside. So if we go to the next slide, it's another picture of the structural steel. As I mentioned, I was actually up there this morning. All of that ground was completely full of snow when I was up there. But these pictures, I believe, were taken on Thursday, so they're fairly up to date as to what it actually looked like with all of the structure now in place. Next slide, please. A little bit closer photograph of the steel work. Next slide. And so here you can begin to see the steel work and the decking, as well as the floor area of the building. I believe, I might be wrong, but I believe that is in the back, looking into the raked floor area. So go to the next slide. Again, the floor and the structural steel. Next slide, please. This is actually, this area is this is called the Grand Stair is what this is called. So it's actually sort of an outdoor patio between the two buildings, and it terraces down, which is why it's called a Grand Stair. But you can also see how the breezeway attaches the two buildings. That's what's happening with the steel that's going on right here, as well as the existing library building and the Woodneath house. So that is, I believe those are all the pictures. Oh, no, there's one more. Is that the last one? Okay, yes, looked like that was the last one. So that's where the Woodneath auditorium is. That's really our project that is really underway in a substantial way at this point. That's about the only one. I do want to point out that I was able to go on a tour of all the South branches last week. And actually it was something that Brent was wanting to do. And then Brent got pulled away, but Michael went on the tour with me. And it was really quite something to be able to see all of the buildings, just one right after the other, and how we've been improving them. And it was definitely a good day. It was an exhausting day, but it was a good day to see all of the updates and the value that we've been bringing to the community. So I think that's all I have that I would want to say about the construction update photos and where we are in the project, and just mentioning the tour briefly. Michael, I'm not sure if you would want to share anything about the tour, other than the fact it was exhausting.
Well, it was well worth it, Steve, and everyone. I think we did 15 or 16, all of them, and we ended up the day with a nice cup of coffee. And so that was really nice. But I was overwhelmed by everything I saw, just from a aesthetic standpoint, and then all the facets, everything that's involved in, really orchestrating the library buildings, all the buildings, all the systems, all the books, all the everything. It was really opened my eyes. So it was a really eye-opening day with Steve, and I'm looking forward to the other half. But yeah, I was really overwhelmed. I was really impressed. Colburn Road, I don't know, that place is staggering. Plus the new Lee Summit. And this, one of the surprises I guess I had was Steve, which was the one that had like the food pantry, that kind of thing?
Oh, that was the Farview Library where we collaborate with Community Services League. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really quite unique and quite impressive too. Just partnering with the community in a way that was really strategic and helpful in building relationships, that kind of stuff, above and beyond, whatever else the library has to offer, which is massive. And so, yeah, just a big thank you to Steve. I guess it was eye-opening. It just opened my eyes to the massive amount of buildings and everything involved, from a standpoint of libraries and, being on the board and getting to oversee all these things and look into all these things. It was way beyond my expectations. So thanks again, Steve.
Well, and this is a longstanding tradition where we go on these branch tours. And I was able to I wanted to kind of dip my toe into the water, sort of a small tour. And we were able to successfully do that. And we're going to do it again next month up north. And then we're going to be doing it on an ongoing basis. So, if you're feeling like you are comfortable riding in a van with 2 or 3 other people, contact Teresa, find out when the next tour is, and I'll be happy to add you to the itinerary to do that. The other thing that I know Ron and I've been talking about doing is maybe this summer having an abbreviated tour, renting a bus maybe, and having an abbreviated tour with as many people as can come. Try to have the entire board, and we might stop at Woodneath and learn a little bit about the Story Center, and stop at Genealogy Center and learn a little bit about their program. But try to engage as many people as possible, possibly this summer, as maybe sort of like a board retreat, continuing education opportunity. So just something Ron and I've been kicking around a little bit, and maybe that'll sound interesting to other folks too. So
I would really encourage people to take advantage of that if they can, because there's nothing like being in person at the libraries to see what we have, the progress that we've made with each, and how wonderful it is to see that. I think it's important that everyone try to take advantage of that as much as possible. I know it takes a lot of time. It's well worth it.
Well worth the time to do it. And just to meet the people that are working in the libraries too, and all the things that they've encountered, with this whole COVID thing. But Ron, I agree with you and Steve. It's impressive, and it really, gets us immersed in the whole library system and what's really happening on the ground.
Oh, I'm sorry, Brent. I kind of engaged a conversation, and that
No,
probably really
quite all
wasn't
right.
my
That's what
purview.
I actually had hoped would come out of it. So I had the opportunity to meet Steve and Michael at North Independence, and I felt some regret that I wasn't able to join. So appreciative of Michael's words. That's our building committee report. A reminder to the building committee members, we meet Thursday. Other board members are welcome. Look for a memo with some additional details about East Lee Summit and a commentary about the bids. It will come with a recommendation from the building committee. We talk about these things with a degree of thoroughness. We hope that you would accept our judgment, but it's every individual's vote. And if you have issues that you want to address or questions that would help you in making that decision, please contact any of us. And if you could give it your timely attention, that would also be appreciated. So that's our report.
Thank you, Brent. Just to comment, I had the opportunity or the pleasant opportunity to go by Woodney's yesterday. And with all the structural steel up there, it takes scant imagination to see what's going to be there within maybe a few months or half a year, whatever. And it's going to be just magnificent. It's going to be it's going to be another treasure in the system. Okay, next committee, finance, John.
Okay, Finance met on April the 1st, appropriate. It was April Fool's Day, I think, good day for the Finance Committee to meet. We met via Zoom, and the principal subject of our meeting was to begin the review of the 21-22 library budget. Just a word of background on that. Years and years ago now, some of us on the board at that time felt that we should be a little more involved in the budget than had been the practice beforehand. And so we started a process which has evolved beautifully over the last many years to result in a process in which the staff goes ahead after January the 1st and begins to prepare the budget for the coming fiscal year. And they put together the estimates of revenue. They put together the expenditures that they believe are appropriate for the coming year for each of the libraries and for the library for the library system as a whole. And that comes to the Finance Committee first. And we have the opportunity in the Finance Committee then to talk with the staff through the director primarily about the kinds of issues that have been involved in the preparation of the budget and have a chance to question the estimates of expenditures and revenues at the same time. And so that's sort of the beginning of the budget, and it gives the board through the Finance Committee the opportunity to convey some ideas on the budget to the administration as they proceed with the budget. Then subsequently, all the other committees and their reports will be I see they're on the agenda tonight, are their portion of the budget. Personnel Committee, the Technology Committee, and what am I missing? And Personnel Committee. I'm missing one. Technology, Personnel, and
Building.
Building Committee, of course. Brent, I'm sorry. I passed by your committee. And all of those committees then hear essentially the same presentation by the staff concerning their own area of interest in the budget. And all of that information then comes back to the Finance Committee in May. And so on May the 7th, we will meet at our regular meeting, and we will then take a look at all of the issues that have been raised, the suggestions that have been raised, the changes that have actually happened in our estimations by that time, if any, and we will have the opportunity to have a final review in May and June. So the Finance Committee will meet in May and June and will ultimately make a report for a balanced budget to the full board at the June meeting of the board. So now back to the April 1st meeting and the fact that it was April Fool's Day. We were delighted that the staff seemed to be playing an April Fool's Day joke on us, because the first thing we heard was that all of the dire results that we thought would occur from the pandemic in terms of our revenues turned out not to be true. It turned out that we actually increased revenues rather than lost revenues. And I must admit, that was shocking. If you remember back, right around this time last year, we were just all beginning to realize what was happening. We were beginning to realize that this world and our country and our state were in a pandemic, and that was going to change things drastically. And we thought that the change would be adverse for the library on all counts. We thought that the expenses of running the library would go up because of our wanting to keep as many things open as possible and yet not be able to operate in a normal manner. We thought the revenues would go down. I mean, I think that would, it was kind of a worrisome conclusion, but we thought that they definitely would go down because people would be unable to make their payments, and the property tax, which supports 95% of our revenue, would fall short. That has not happened. So it wasn't an April Fool's joke, even a happy one. It was real. And so we discovered that we had a significant amount of revenue in addition to what we had forecast for this coming year. Because during the budget, when we were so concerned about what would happen, why we tucked away lots of money with the board's permission and approval to try. We decided not to transfer funds to the capital improvement fund as we always have. So now we've been in effect 2 years without transferring money to the capital improvement fund. We did all kinds of other things to reduce or slow down our expenditure rate so that we could hedge against there being this revenue shortfall that we thought would happen. Well, here we are, and it's no joke. We are, in fact, surprised that all of our revenues are significantly up. I'm going to ask Steve to give some detail on that in just a moment or two, so that we get an understanding. We had lots of questions and probed lots of areas, and the administration presented to us ways that we could successfully use that money, needed to use it for the forthcoming year. And so in a second, I'm going to ask Steve if he would just review those. I want to emphasize, though, that these are not approved items. These are things that are still in discussion and review on the budget. So our job, all the committees and the Finance Committee recommending to the board and the board itself will make the final decisions about the budget and how this additional revenue that we're so happy to have will be spent in this coming year, with one exception, that we have an action item coming from this committee meeting that relates to the monies that are in the current year budget already that were not transferred to the capital fund as we had originally planned to do. But we gave that up when we realized the effect of the pandemic on us. So with that exception, I'll ask Steve if he would just review what he gave to us as the possible uses for the extra money that we're so grateful to be, we think we're so grateful to be receiving. Steve?
Sure. So what we have, as John mentioned, there were a couple of different lines that came from revenues over expenses from previous years, and we'd identified these, but decided not to transfer these and just keep them in the fund balance for liquidity purposes. And then we also underestimated our revenue. One of the reasons why I think revenue came in a little bit more healthy than we thought was the home ownership market. And I know a lot of you have read about this, about how brisk home sales have been during the pandemic. And a lot of that was just, people spending more time at home and wanting to move to new homes. And when they moved to new homes, you get a certificate of value, which increases the assessed valuation. And we think that may be one piece of the puzzle that's driving some of this. Then we also, as John mentioned, tried to slow spending on a number of, on our three big lines. And once we were done, we started, Quan and I started looking at our fund balance, and our fund balance with all of those things added up. And some of these things, as I said, had nothing really to do with the pandemic. I mean, they're still in the fund balance due to the pandemic, but it was because of things that may have happened 2 fiscal years ago that we decided not to transfer. But once we looked at this, we felt that there was a fund balance of about $9.4 million higher than the expenses that we have for the coming year. So what staff did, and all of you are on committees, so you've been in committees where we've discussed some of these expenditures as they relate to your particular committee. So some of these may not come as surprise, but some of these may be new to you. So I'm just going to go through all of the different ones that we discussed. The first one, which is the one John was mentioned about specifically, is a transfer of $4 million to the capital projects fund from the operating fund balance. In 2021, in the fiscal year we are in right now, we plan to transfer $2 million. In the fiscal year that we are coming to, 21-22, we also planned to, actually we planned to transfer $1 million. $1 million actually puts us, it actually puts the entire amount, the $113 million for the entire capital projects fund, plus begins to start funding the repair and maintenance of our buildings, which that's our plan going forward with our transfers. So that's one line. Another line that we had, $275,000, was to help with the, to assure that we had cash flow for the Woodneath project. This just helps us to assure that we're not going to be waiting to pay any bills, so that once the Woodneath house is done, we can get in there and start using it. The next line, the next thing that we talked about, and we talked about this in the personnel committee, was to create a fund of $750,000, a pool for performance pay for our staff. And the idea here is that, as John mentioned, this isn't all me or Quan. I mean, this is the entire body of Mid-Continent really worked hard to try to make sure that that we kept the finances where they needed to be, cut corners where it made sense, picked up extra shifts where we needed to during the hiring freeze. And what we're going to do is use some of the extra money that's in the personnel fund that's there due to the hiring freeze. I mean, that's how it got accumulated, to do a one-time performance payment for the library staff. We are also, from this year's operating fund, we are going to allocate $150,000 to pay for a salary compensation study and evaluation of job descriptions. Our plan was to do that either this coming budget year or the next year, as it was due. But this is just a situation where opportunity was there. So we allocated $150,000 to get that work going and to kind of get a jump start on some of that work. The next line, out of this year's budget, we plan on spending $530,000. This is out of the materials side, books, databases, things like that. And this $530,000 will actually pay a remaining outstanding balance for our perpetual license to the Kansas City Star Digital Archive. So we own 1880 to 1990. This actually helps us get 1991 to 2013 and pays off that perpetual license. We had, I think, 2 more years worth of payments, and this just wipes them out completely. In terms of technology services, we actually have 2 technology services that we want to talk about. Both of these are transfers to the capital project fund. One of them is to replace all of our self-check hardware. our self-check hardware is getting a little old and hard for us to update and upgrade. And so Brian has been talking about making a change to that. Again, opportunity was there, and so we were looking to take advantage of that. The other transfer to the capital projects fund for technology is to upgrade and update and replace all of our enterprise storage systems. Our enterprise storage is a little bit old, but we've discovered that particularly through the pandemic with a lot of people working remotely, it makes sense for us to upgrade this and update it to better reflect the way people are working today. Two more expenses. One of them is coming out of operations, and it's essentially a professional fee, a professional service contract. We are in the process of doing 3 process improvement studies with an outside industrial engineer. We try to do these projects from every year, but instead of doing 1, we're looking to do 3, again, because we had the resources in order to do this. And so we're moving forward with that, increasing the efficiency of our operations to increase our overall efficiency and better spending of taxpayer resources. And then the final thing that we have on here is again, an expenditure out of this year's funds, out of the operations side. It's to the community relations and planning divisions, $125,000, and it's to enhance our existing budget for advertising and promotion activities. And the idea here is to kind of get people to boost our message, to get people reacquainted and with the library post-pandemic, and to help drive people back to the library. This $125,000 is on top of the traditional budget that the marketing department has. So this would, I'm trying to remember what that number is. I think it's normally in the neighborhood of 300,000. So it's an addition to that amount. So in the end, the way that this works out, it's a total expenditure of $7,380,000. So of that $9 million that I was talking about before, $9.4 million, it's an expenditure of $7.3 million. 5.25 of it is a transfer to the capital projects fund. And so in the finance committee meeting, there was a vote, and the committee voted to make a recommendation to the board. And I was looking to see if I could, let me get the actual verbiage on this, because fortunately the verbiage matters. The recommendation from the committee to the full board was to transfer $5,525,000 from the operating fund balance to the capital projects fund to be used as follows: $1.25 million for technology expenses, $275,000 for appropriate expenses for the Woodneath project, and $4 million for capital improvements and replacements and maintenance.
And of that amount, the bulk of that would have been, under normal circumstances, that would have been almost routinely approved as a transfer from the operating fund to the capital fund. Is that correct?
4 million of it would have, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Again, I want to emphasize that this is the process of board review, and we have a couple of steps left to go before we make a final recommendation to the full board. And like Brent, we hope that the full board will listen to us and know that we have thoroughly reviewed the budget at the time we make a recommendation, or we wouldn't be making it. But we will be doing that, and we wanted to let you, however, hear in the sort of raw stage where the budget is at the present time. And so if there are comments or questions that you have plenty of time to get those to me or to Charlotte, who is the co-chair of the committee. And we would welcome any comments, suggestions that you may have that you would want us to incorporate in the review, or questions that you have or suggestions that you have, all those are quite welcome. But at this point, I would like to move that we, give me the exact words, would you?
Sure. The wording of the motion was, or the recommendation, the Finance Committee recommends to the full board to transfer $5,525,000 from the operating fund balance to the capital projects fund to be used as follows. 1.25 million for technology expenses, $275,000 for appropriated expenses for the Woodneath project, and $4 million for the capital improvements, replacement, and maintenance fund.
Okay, so as chairman, I would make the recommendation, or I would make the motion on behalf of the committee to adopt that recommendation from the Finance Committee as a whole. And ask if there's a second.
I second.
Lori?
Noel.
Noel, hi Noel, thank you.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we have a transfer of $5.25 million from the operating fund to the capital projects funds. Is there any discussion? None. All in favor, please signify by stating aye.
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 Any opposed? I'm sorry, any opposed? Any abstaining? It's passed.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And that concludes the report of the Finance Committee, but you'll hear more from us later on.
I might also mention that I'm on that committee, and I have absolutely seen the diligent, absolutely tireless effort that John and Charlotte do, and it's a pleasure to work with them. Personnel Committee.
Hi. The Personnel Committee met on April 14th. And as you may recall, the April Personnel Committee meeting usually starts the drafting of next year's budget. The committee discussed several matters and has one recommendation to the board. I'll deal with the recommendation first. Staff started by illustrating the projected revenue estimate from fiscal year 2021 to 22. And that has also been shared with the Finance Committee. The projection shows a slight increase in revenue from 60.5 million to 61.6 million, using the same levy rate used in fiscal year 2020 to 2021. After accounting for the debt service and other payments, the operating revenue for the coming year is estimated to be 56.1 million. Using the traditional budgeting benchmarks, 36.6 million or 60%, we usually use that as our ceiling, 60% of the budgeted allocated to personnel. We have 21.3 million or 22% is a target for materials, and 10.2 million or 18% is the target for operations. For context, we spend much more than our peers in materials and much less in personnel and operations if you compare us to our peers nationally, which is good news for our patrons. Next, staff walked the committee through the projected personnel expenses for fiscal year 2021 and 2022. The budget authorizes a total of 418.5 FTE, which is an increase of 6.5 FTEs. These new positions are allocated for the new unit of service in Lee Summit. As you recall, Lee Summit is going from 2 branches to 3, and currently their branches are number 1 and number 3 in circulation. So as we add a 3rd branch, there is additional staffing needs there. There was a question about personnel allocation, specifically adding positions in safety and security department, as there are about 48 FTE authorized and unfulfilled due to the hiring freeze from the current fiscal year. Staff are working to ensure that the newly hired positions are considered for current needs and not just an automatic backfill. Staff illustrated that there is a budgeted 2.5% adjustment to pay ranges for benefits eligible staff to help assure market competitiveness, to guard against compensation and compression, to guard against compression and to keep ahead of the state minimum wage increases. A similar increase was seen in the proposed pay rate for hourly positions. With these additions and changes, total payroll was recommended to increase by 2.9%. I believe this follows the stated wish of the board to have fewer but highly paid, better paid staff. Staff then walked through the benefits related expenses, highlighting decreases in medical insurance, which is good news for us, ancillary insurance, and the employee assistance program. Once all expenses were considered, the total personnel budget was 1.8% higher than last year, but is $454,000 below the 60% target for the yearly operational budget. Following discussion, the committee voted to recommend the following action. The committee recommends to the full board a motion to approve adoption of the personnel components of the proposed 2021 to 2022 budget. Coming from committee, it doesn't need a second. So are there any questions, or Steve, would you like to add anything?
Joycelyn, I think you did a really good job of describing what we described, and did so much more efficiently than we did. We described it to you.
So this is our only item on here that needs a vote. So Ron, I'll leave you to guide the vote on this, since you're in person. For the budget recommendation. Remember, this is not a final vote. This is a recommendation to take this initial budget. It will be looked upon again by the finance committee.
Yeah, and just one more minor thing about this. This is again a long-standing practice. It's not written anywhere or not required anywhere. But if the board essentially gives an endorsement of this, then what it allows the staff to do is it speaks for 60% of the upcoming budget, which makes the final 40% kind of fall in place easier. Let's Quan keep more of his dark hair and less gray hair for him. So if the board feels comfortable with endorsing this, then it helps move that process along. So
I've got a question.
yeah.
Is there a motion to that?
Joycelyn made a motion, and as a recommendation from the committee, it doesn't require a second. So we're just in discussion.
I've got a discussion question. On the top line, the FTEs 364.5, is that a current number, a projected number, or a number we're hoping for because of the proposed budget?
Yeah, the 364.5 FTEs were the number of people on the payroll as of 3/26 of 21.
Is there a projection of increasing number of people on payroll?
Yeah, and so if you go down about 4 more lines where it says 2020 to 2021, total authorized benefits eligible FTEs 412. 412 is actually
Your
the amount
target.
that was the amount that was targeted for the year that we're in right now.
Okay.
And then, as Joycelyn mentioned, if you go down a couple more lines, you can see where it says up to 6.5 additional benefits eligible FTEs for 2020-21 to 418. So 418.5 is actually going to be the new authorized ceiling. And that number is going up due in part to staffing the new Lee Summit Library.
Right, okay. Now, on the budget for the determination of this, how do How do you figure how many people you're going to need based on is it based on the budget or just projections of the library needs and all that? Okay.
Yeah, it's an incremental, standard, I guess is the way that you would look at it. So we look at the amount that we were authorized last year. Assume, or not assume, but we research and look into this, do we still need those positions? Do we need to keep the positions but have them do something different and all of that? But we start off just in terms of numbering, just looking at a point in time in the payroll. How many people are on the payroll? And then how many people are not on the payroll, but we have authorized? And that number is much, much larger than normal. Normally that number is in the neighborhood of 10 to 15, but it's actually 47 this time. And that's because of the hiring freeze, because we didn't hire anybody.
Okay. I was just curious on the numbers.
Yeah, that's how we get there. So we start off essentially with the amount that you all authorized, which you all authorized 412 people last year. And then we build from there.
John, please.
Yeah, I think it's important, again, to repeat what was said earlier, and that is that this is an endorsement. This is not the actual approval of this amount. This is an amount that will go into the committee input will come back to the finance committee, and the finance committee will again take a look, and by then we'll know even more about revenues and so forth, and we will then make final decisions. Will be recommendations to the full board. So this is an endorsement, very important endorsement, because if you don't think this is the right thing to do, well, then you don't want to endorse it now. But from what we've heard, we think it is the right thing to do. But that's what we're doing. That's what the vote means.
So then is it policy that we actually have a vote or just have the record?
Yeah. Usually we do vote, usually the board votes to endorse this, or not.
And we've already had a motion and a second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, fine. Thank you, Steve. It's been moved and seconded that the board adopts the recommendation from the Personnel Committee. All in favor, please signify by aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstaining? It's passed.
Thank you.
Okay, the next matter is the report from,
I think Joycelyn's got
Yeah.
at least one more.
oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, that was our voting item. We have some informational items. One is our insurance report. Jennifer Wrigley gave an amazing report, very detailed on our insurance and rates. And if anyone wants to know more in detail, please talk with Steve and Jennifer about that and see the minutes from the Personnel Committee. But in recent months, you may have noticed that the Health Insurance Reserve Fund continues to grow to the point that it is now higher than our designated ceiling. If you remember a little while ago, we voted upon a policy for what would be a recommended debt ceiling so that we can maintain our funding within that range. This suggests that our experience has improved. And in 2020, MCPL had planned costs of $423 per month per person. This is a decrease of $96 and about $20 lower than the average within the book of business. Staff shared the most recent report from Blue Cross and Blue Shield that affirmed that MCPL's experience is generally outperforming the carrier's book of business in many areas except specialty prescriptions. Thank you. Staff attributes this to a focus on health and wellness spearheaded by the staff's wellness coordinator, along with activities to be smarter healthcare consumers, like using urgent care and primary care physicians instead of an emergency room. Those simple things can really reduce our expenses in that area, and we commend staff for cooperating with the wellness efforts that we've had. In summary, MCPL is seeing a 9.9% decrease in plan costs, an 11.9% decrease in cost per member per month. And even considering the issue with specialty drugs, MCPL saw a 12% decrease in specialty drugs as part of the plan, and a 2.5% increase in dispensing of generic drugs, or 84%. So I'll pause here. I have one more thing about the fund balance. See if anyone has any questions, particularly of Steve or of Jennifer on that.
I just want to underscore that those of you who have been on the board for a couple of years remember that we had a couple of really bad years in a row, and it wasn't good. And when one year we actually looked at changing the plan design a little bit because we were trying to keep costs in control. Our feeling was that we were doing okay. It was just bad luck that we were just having some real that we weren't being we were using our consumer activities. And what we've seen is that as we've carried on with this and sort of leveled out, that our experience is very good. Now, you know, it's one of my friends always says whenever he's giving me good financial news, he always says, "This too shall pass." And I'm sure that that's going to be the case with our positive insurance. At some point, we're going to have a handful of claims that are going to have an issue again. But the good news is that I think we're doing everything we can to manage our insurance, and you can see the results. The results are very positive.
This is for 364 people?
I think so. Jennifer, are you online? Do you know how many total people we have insured?
Are you able to hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I've got a new headset on, so I apologize. It's about 475 members, so about 300 and right now about 345 staff members and plus their dependents. So yeah, it's about 475 total members.
And so that difference are dependents that are buying on from their spouse or.
Are there any other questions?
This is Lori Lamagna. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I just had a quick question. I heard you say something about like preventive, like, are you doing incentives for like maybe, using Fitbit and getting extra steps or something? Is that the type of incentives you were talking about, or is there something different?
Jennifer, would you like to talk a little bit about our wellness activities and some of the things that we're doing?
We really do. At this point, we've been doing some type of wellness program for quite a while, and had the same wellness coordinator who came to us through St. Luke's, but is now our staff member, who not only do we do programs like what you're talking about, like with incentives for walking or fitness incentives, different contests, those types of things, but we also engage in some pretty comprehensive education for staff, education on their personal wellness, education on their personal mental health, and also on workplace mental health, education on being better healthcare consumers, and where to get the best care. And we have had the success that we've seen from that has been cumulative, and we can attribute that to staff over time, being receptive to and responsive to education and the program that has been provided for them. So.
Thank you. That's really great to hear about. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. What I understand, we're in really good shape with that, according to Jennifer and according to Blue Cross Blue Shield. Next up would be, we discussed the 2020-2021 fund balance. Like all other committees, staff shared several operational expenses they intend to make before the end of the year to use the accumulated fund balance that happened as a result of continuous of cautious management, unusual operations, and uncertainty during the pandemic. One of those was the staff will use some unspent personnel resources to make a one-time performance payment to staff. This is to recognize efforts made during the pandemic to help with operational savings and to efforts staff made to put the library in a positive financial position. Again, this is a one-time expense. The other thing is that staff will also use funds to pay for a compensation and job description review to assure market competitiveness, appropriate job descriptions, and both of these were likely to be budgeted in the fiscal 2021 to 22 or the following year anyway. But having these funds allow us to do it now, but it would be something that we would need to do. Another thing was that staff will also use some funds to engage an industrial engineer to help with process improvement in 3 areas. Typically, staff tries to engage one exercise like this annually, as it is part of the senior leadership team's goals. And I'll give Steve a chance to highlight those if he wishes. An example of those would be this sticky paper thing we did with the polls. But let me just give Steve a chance to talk to any of those and also field any questions that we may have.
Yeah, I think Joycelyn really did describe that. I mean, the main reason that we talked about the industrial engineer and the performance improvement processes is because that is actually one of the goals. That's one of the annual goals of mine as well. So we brought that up to the personnel committee just so that they could see that there was additional action, actually a lot of additional action occurring on that one particular goal. But nothing else to add at this point, except for the fact that the individual we are working with has been very successful. When he did his project with us for the holds processing, he was able to document an annual saving of $600,000 a year with us. And I think his processing for his materials processing for our library books had about a $300,000 savings per year. So it's usually a very good experience when we work with him. So.
Is he involved in any way with the upgrading of the self-check?
Not at this point. Not at this point, no.
That's all from me, Ron, unless there's any other comments or concerns.
Thank you, Joycelyn. The Technology Committee?
It's back to me again. I was asked to fill in for Ron on April 19th. The Technology Committee held a hybrid meeting on April 19th with information items, but no votes or recommendations at this time. Tackled 2 things. The first was a transfer to Capital Projects Fund for technology projects. Staff explained in greater detail to the committee about the enterprise-wide storage upgrade and self-check update projects that will be funded by the transfer from operating fund balance to the Capital Projects Fund, as put forward by the Finance Committee. We just looked at that a moment ago. Members of the committee were able to ask additional questions and to gain a better understanding about those projects. And the other item was that we looked at the preliminary technology budget for fiscal year 2021 and 22 year. So it's a month early, but we thought we'd get a jump on that. Staff provided a preliminary recommendation on the upcoming technology budget. The recommended budget will be refined and will come back to the committee to be considered for recommendation to the full board next month. That's all I had for technology.
Thank you, Joycelyn. Librarian report?
So just a couple of things. If we'll go to the next slide, the COVID dashboard. COVID dashboard is continuing to trend in the right direction. We did have a little bit of a blip. Do want to point this out. We did have we did have a COVID positive employee, and then we did actually close one of our branches for one day for enhanced cleaning. because of just how everything worked out. It was just an unfortunate thing in terms of timing, but we got everything flipped around really quickly. So just the one, April, in the month of April, and we did have one with no closure in March as well. So definitely the numbers are headed in the right direction, as you can see from the dashboard. In terms of the next thing, I've got three other, is it three or four? I've got four other things to report, and I want to report these real quickly, and then I'm going to turn it over to Katina for the quarterly statistics report. The first thing I want to talk to you about is Library Giving Day. And as you remember, we talked about this, I believe, last month, and you got some email messages on this. And this was an operation activity between Mid-Continent and the Mid-Continent Foundation. And it's really our first campaign into Library Giving Day, which is always part of National Library Week every April, every year. But this was our first time that we dipped our toe into the water. The campaign focused on purchasing more of our Wi-Fi to-go devices with service for 1 year. And here's some of the updates or some of the report out from this. The goal on this was to reach 20 new donors. We actually reached 61 total donors, and 20 of which were new. So we met our goal on meeting new donors. Our goal was to raise $35,000. This would have allowed us to purchase 10 new hotspots and servers for 1 year. We ended up raising $8,525, which allowed us to purchase 24 new hotspots. The average donation was $140.
Steve, it's Diana. I'm sorry. Our goal was actually 3,500. I think you said 35,000. So
You're right.
To let everybody know.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't have my comma in the right place here, and so
no, that's okay. I would love it if we got to 35,000
Me too.
someday soon. But yeah, our goal was 3,500. We actually raised double that, and and we had hoped to buy 20 hotspots, and we're actually going to be able to buy 49. So
49. Yeah,
just
that was
to clarify on those numbers.
Yeah. So yeah, just misread the comma.
Thank you.
And so, yeah, the average donation was $140, and due to as Diana mentioned, due to the one-to-one foundation match, that amount, the $8,500 became $17,000, funding 49 new hotspots and service. So I think by nearly any measure, this was a very, very successful initial campaign. So next topic is curating home. I just got this just moments before I came in to the meeting. And this is a new poetry anthology from Woodneath Press. It's a Kansas City poetry anthology from 34 Kansas City poets. The project is associated with the Missouri Bicentennial, and there's about 44 poems, 34 poets and 44 poems in the anthology. And there were about 300 submissions. So, yet another project that's come out from Woodneath Press. As Brent mentioned about the guaranteed maximum price, I have already sent the summary report to you about Lee Summit and explaining about the idea of the construction manager at risk and guaranteed maximum price. And for those of you who either aren't on the building committee or who may be newer to the library board, learning about how this process works might be very useful to you. It's very different from the way bidding typically happens, where people come in and they bid, and then of course they underbid, and then they come back and say, we're going to need more money. That's not the way our process works at all. And so reading a little bit about the process, I think, can be beneficial. But one of the things, as Brent mentioned, is that commodity construction, or the commodities for constructions right now are very, very volatile. And we feel like the bid, the GMP, based on what we're hearing from J.E. Dunn, we feel like the GMP for Lee Summit's going to be favorable. So we want to lock this in as quickly as possible. So Mr. Grubaugh has given us a process called polling the board, particularly when we have something that is time sensitive like this. So again, assuming that the building committee recommends the guaranteed maximum price to the full board, then Teresa and Ellie will be calling all of you Thursday afternoon, Friday morning, trying to get you to weigh in on the poll. Hopefully you will agree with this and you'll give it the thumbs up, and then we'll ratify the plan at the December meeting. I'm sorry, the May meeting. But doing so allows us to lock that price in, and given the volatility of commodities, steel, wood, things like that, it seems to make sense. So be on the lookout for that on Thursday. And then last thing I wanted to talk about was in-person meetings. As people are becoming, more people are becoming vaccinated, staff is working to create space in the boardroom to facilitate in-person meetings. Teresa and I do have some acrylic dividers that are coming up to set up between table spaces. As we transition, we should be able to have those at our next meeting. I kind of believe that we're always going to have some form of hybrid meetings going forward, because such meetings certainly do make it easier for you all, our volunteers. But we also want to encourage, and I'm going to encourage my staff to continue to participate via Zoom until we can gather safely in the way we used to pre-pandemic. But please feel free to talk with me or Teresa if you have any concerns or questions about future in-person meetings versus future Zoom meetings. So that's what I have on librarians report. And if there are no questions
I got a
on
question.
that, okay.
You gonna put things here, dividers between us?
Yeah, they're not very obtrusive. They're actually designed for bars, and they're only about this long. And so they sit on the table and they only go out about this.
Be like grade school all over.
Kind of, but they're acrylic. You can see through them. They're not that high. And as people get more comfortable, we'll stop using them, or maybe only use them during cold and flu season. But it was something we felt like we could use.
Steve, this is Yummy. I have a question, Steve. Yeah, maybe the dividers could be optional.
Yeah, I mean, they're portable. They're not screwed into the table or anything. So if people want to take them down, they can take them down. We're just trying to do what we can to make people feel comfortable coming back. So if there's nothing else, I would like to have Katina give you the quarterly statistics report.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. So this is the quarterly statistics reports that will cover January, February, and March of 2021. And so of our fiscal year, that is Q3. If we can go to the next slide. As a reminder, our core measures in our current strategic plan, our measures of mission fulfillment, as we call it, are active cardholders, customer satisfaction, and customer transactions, or customers using library services and materials. So the first one that we start with is, if we go to the next slide, is active customers. And that the supplemental measures related to active customers are market penetration, the number of new cardholders we get, and the number of new cardholders we retain. So the next slide has a pretty busy chart on it, but to give you an idea, the description is there on the left. The next slide, or excuse me, the next column is represents the numbers from this most recent quarter that we've completed, January, February, March of 2021. And then the next column compares this Q3 number to Q2, or the October, November, December number. And then that last column on the right represents the change from this same time in 2020. So you will see currently, as of March 31st, 2021, we have 229,000, almost 230,000 active cardholders. And that's about 7% less than last quarter. So 7% less than December 31 of 2020. And it's about 32% fewer cardholders than we had in March 31 of 2020. But you will see there with our new card registrations, we had about just over 7,000 last quarter, which is 21% more than the previous quarter, October, November, December. But it's about 33% fewer signups than this time last year. And what I've discovered, or not discovered, but what I could say at this point is that we do, even though we do have a good number of people that are signing up online, with our branches being closed or having limited services available in the branch, we have fewer people coming to our branches, and so we have fewer card registrations that way. So hopefully, as we continue on our path back to restoring full services, we will see that registration number increase as well. Market penetration, that represents the number of households with active cardholders. And this is an estimate, the next two numbers are estimates. We're at about 37% of the households within our library district have active cardholders. That's no change from last quarter, no change from December 31, but about 7 points less. So in other words, it was 44% a year ago in March 31. And I'll come back to that in a second. The new cardholder retention, that means of the people who signed up for a card April 1 of 2020 through, or excuse me, April 1, 2019 through March 31, 2020, 39% of those folks are still using their card. And that's 3 points more than we had at the end of December, but it's 10 points less than this time last year. And really, those two relatively large changes from this time last year have to do with how we were counting student accounts. And if you'll notice there in that the last number there showing 100%, last year we were counting all student cards as active, and they were active, year round and then into the next year. In 2020, at the beginning of the school year, we actually changed the way that we count, and we actually are only counting new cards and cards that are actually being used, not all the cards that are out there. So currently, of the 115,000 student accounts that are out there, and that's for students in K through 12 schools, students in public schools in 16 of our public schools. 58% of them are using their cards. They're either new or using their cards. And it's a smaller number of new. The bulk of that 58% are kids that are actually using their cards. And then at the end of last quarter, December 31, we were at 59%. And then, as I just mentioned, last year, this time we were counting all those cards were either new or most of them were new or had been used. So again, all of these sort of things work together to, either boost or, take away from that active cardholder number. And so these are the things that we are monitoring as we're looking at how many people are actually using the library cards that they have. So if we go to the next slide, please. So the next thing that we're measuring is customer satisfaction. One of the ways that we do that is with our Net Promoter Score, and we also have surveys after our programs. And we also, we've doing surveys is a part of each component of the library service that we're delivering. So if we go to the next slide, it's just our description of the Net Promoter Score. And we asked the question, how likely are you to recommend that others use Mid-Continent Public Library? If people rate us a 9 or a 10, they're considered a promoter. Anyone who rates us 6 or below are considered detractors. And so the net score is that promoters subtracting, or detractors being subtracted from promoters. If we go to the next slide, our baseline, what we started this strategic plan with was 91.8 was our NPS score. Our goal was to get to 92. Currently, as of March 31st, we are at 90.1. So we've been sort of going, back and forth each month between 89 and 90. We are up to about 2,500 customers that have taken the survey. We do a sample of each week of the people who used their card the previous week. So we're up to 2,500 customers that are rating us at 90 or at 90.1 as our Net Promoter Score. And I review all of the second question on the survey is, please explain your score. And so that word cloud there, or the larger the word, the more times it's said. And so, that we've got friendly staff, helpful staff, that people are appreciative of being able to have books and have reading material available to them during the pandemic. And it's a lot of, it's easy to come and get books, and and a lot of people that have reported being glad that they can come back into the branches and browse. So that word cloud is a really good representation of what people are saying about why they appreciate their library. And then the last point on this slide is that 97% of the people who completed an evaluation after our virtual library programs say that the program that they attended is very good or excellent. So I think we're in this past quarter, we had, close to 750 surveys. So 97% of that is a great number. If we go to the next slide. So our final measure of mission fulfillment is related to customer transactions, which, this is the one that, if people are, using the library, then their card's active, and hopefully if we're providing them good customer service, then they are using the library more and more people have so it all works together. But, we're looking, like I said, use of library services. And then we're also monitoring, what's not included in there is door count and pre and post improvement trends. So in other words, after a branch reopens, after construction, we are also monitoring how their services and use is ramping up. So if we go to the next slide, this just gives you a quick description of the goal that we set for this fiscal year. Last year, 1920, our goal was 12.5, even with, that last quarter pretty much being, very minimal services being offered. We still had 11.3 million transactions last year. And so our goal, based on looking at, the transactions in 2020 as a whole, and also, recognizing that, Parkville, South Independence, Grandview, Coburn Road would be open before the end of this fiscal year. We set a goal at 9 million transactions for this fiscal year. And I can tell you, we are already at 7.1 million transactions so far. So we are, unless, I don't have any wood to knock on, I'm not even going to say it. We're at 7.1 million right now. We've got another quarter to go. So I think we're safe in reaching and possibly exceeding our goal. So if we go to the next slide, which should be the last slide, this just gives you a quick rundown of, how those transactions shape up for this past quarter, again, January, February, March of 2021. And the thing that I'll remind all board members of is the monthly statistics that end up in the board agenda. You're able to see these same numbers on a monthly basis. There isn't a chart that is this succinct, but you can see what the total circulation is, the use of virtual resources, internet access, program attendance, and use of physical resources. Those are all on separate pages within that monthly statistical report. So I wanted to just remind you that you could be following along with this on a monthly basis. But for this last quarter, you'll see that we had 2.5 million transactions, which is about 10% more than that last quarter, the October, November, December. As far as circulation goes, it's up 10% from last quarter. Use of virtual resources, which is clicks on links to our online resources, but also page views of our virtual branch services, things like, get a library card, get a reading suggestions, that sort of thing. So that's up about, again, 10% from the last quarter. Internet accesses is down about 12% from the last quarter, but I think we had a very mild beginning of the winter. We were really busy in October. So that drove, we were not as busy in January and February, and February was very cold. And so that's where that difference is there with internet accesses. We just didn't have as many people using computers this past quarter. Program attendance, we had fewer programs. Therefore, the program attendance is down about 12% from last quarter. And then use of physical resources, that's mostly reference questions, but also, we had a couple of, I know we had the Jackson County Election Board used the community hall at MGC to train election judges. So that was, that boosted the number a little bit in March. So again, like I said, 2.5 million transactions this past quarter. We have about 1.9 million transactions to go. And I believe that it's, we will, especially with, summer library program starting in June, I think we'll be really good to reach our goal for this year. And so that is my report.
Thank you, Katina. Like I've been saying to everybody, it's going to be nearly impossible for us to benchmark off of 2020, and it's going to take a little while for us to get back to the level where we were in 2019. But I think you can see that there are some indicators that we're heading in the right direction for a lot of things. And so as we do things like re-engage with our community feels more comfortable coming and visiting with us, we're starting to move back toward that 2019 level, which is a very, very good thing. So thank you, Katina. Oh,
Not about ours, but do you know if any other libraries publish numbers like this? We have, I'm sure we're better than most. I was just wondering if we have any thoughts.
Katina, in terms of normative data, I mean, we do, Orange Boy has some normative data that we compare with, but what else would you like to share?
Well, like you said, the Orange Boy data is more about, market penetration, and, how we're doing with new cardholders, so that thinking about those, that active cardholders section of the report. But yeah, that was Charlotte that asked the question. Correct?
Yes, correct.
This is one of those times where me having conversations with our peer libraries would probably be the best way to figure out how they're doing. And yeah, just having conversations. But I, also, my contact at Orange Boy can also sort of give us, a little bit more feedback on how everybody else is doing. But I know in as far as, keeping our cardholders active and keeping the number of households within our district, with active cards, we are doing very well in that respect.
One other thing that I'll point out, and I'm surprised Quan didn't jump in here, is that always in the budget, we put some normative data at the back of the budget every year as well, don't we?
The CAFR.
Oh, it's the CAFR. Yeah, that's right. The Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, not the budget. And it does tend to be some of these output type of measures, Other libraries also serving between 500,000 and 1 million people. What's their average circulation? What's their budget, et cetera. So it's about time for us to dust those off for the coming year. So.
Any other questions or comments?
Great
Thank
job,
you,
Katina. Great
Thank
job.
you.
Good job.
Absolutely.
Very good job.
Any announcements? Announcements?
Yeah, just please review your calendars. This is the time when, as John mentioned, most committees are going to be meeting to talk over their sections of the budget, starting, and then, of course, we've got the big building committee meeting that's coming up. But anything else in terms of announcements, Teresa?
No, just what's new there. If you take a look at that section, it goes to June, so it's pretty much all there.
Hey, Teresa, this is Brian. Are the technology committee meetings there at 10 a.m. now, right?
Yeah, so that is a misprint in the agenda. Yes, okay. So yeah, I will get that out and get that changed. So what Brian is saying is it was at 7:30, it'll be at 10. Thank you, Brian.
In terms of program, one thing I would like to point out that I noticed on here, and I'm sorry I should have led with this, is that the Lit Up, that's the Teen Literature Festival, that's helped managed by teens and for teens, starts April the 26th, and it's virtual this year, running through May the 5th. And so that's something that it's always an interesting event. Even last year when it was virtual, it was still an interesting event to get these young teens together who enjoy reading and enjoy literature, then kind of find their tribe, if you will, and be able to discuss reading. And the teens actually do the interviews of the authors. We always are able to give away books, and it's always a really, really good event. So if there's an opportunity for you to pop in, I'd encourage you to do so, just to see this event. It's one of the spotlight events that we do. The Genre Con, the Veterans Salute. It's one of the big events. That's it.
Just to confirm, the agenda did have reference to maybe a closed session. That is not to happen.
No.
It is not that, yeah,
building committee and
we put it on the agenda because the committees did meet in closed session, and if there was some reason that the report required that we go into closed session.
Okay.
we would do that. But there was As it turned out, there was no reason.
Terrific. Okay.
Right, and I forgot to mention that we had a closed session on at least one of the same items that the building
Building
committee
committee.
had. And we discussed these and decided that there was they could be handled and it was not necessary to have a closed session from a finance.
Good. Thank you. Trustee comments?
Well, I just can't help but say, I want to say to Katina, thank you so much for what you've done. It's really wonderful to have that sort of feedback on a constant basis. I think one of the things we're seeing a number of things based on our pandemic year, which is not quite over, I would say. But I think we've seen more awareness of our virtual branch and people. I'm not sure that the data really captures that as much as from what I'm hearing from people, that they were not as aware as they should have been about our virtual branch, and they now know more about it because out of necessity, they've had to use it. Well, I hope that we can make sure that continues because that really is an important part of what we do. And getting services to all of our patrons in that regard is an important part of that. In our meeting concerning the additional revenue that we appear we're going to have, a comment was made, which I'll just pass along, and we'll probably discuss it more in the Finance Committee meeting, that perhaps an amount of $145,000, I think, was proposed for additional, I would call it public relations activities, regarding the use of the library and the things that the library has that are available to help people through their lives. And the comment was made that perhaps that's not enough. And I think that's what struck me as Katina was talking about that, is that we've lost a little bit in several areas, and understandably. I mean, if you can't use the library on a regular basis like you're accustomed to, you tend to lose a little bit of awareness about what's going on. And I think we have an obligation to make sure that we're spending enough to make sure that we come back from that, and that we do some special things to make sure that people understand what tremendous resources we have, and they're getting better and better and better by the day as new buildings are open. I hear from people all the time about the buildings that we've already opened and how incredible they are, even though maybe some of them haven't even used them yet. They have been in them and they've been near them, and they see, how important they are in people's lives. So I just hope we revisit that number as we discuss in the finance committee. That's all I have. Oh, no, one more thing. I'm sorry. We are not quite done with fundraising on the old home at Woodneath. And I just think everybody has to be aware of that. And if you know someone, if you can think of someone who might be willing to bring somewhere between $10,000 and $50,000 to the table in the next couple of months, by July the 1st, I think specifically, then we need to know about it because we're getting to a point where we're almost there. I mean, it's incredible to me that we started out with nothing and managed to raise over $4 million, but we're not quite to the amount that we actually need in total. We've done great, but we can't stop now. We've got just a short time left in which we should be able to raise another somewhere around $50,000, I'm saying. Now, Diana's online and she's probably maybe thinking a different number. I don't know, but that's about how short we are at this point, somewhere near that. And surely we know people with the means to step in and make that, close that gap in a hurry. She's given me a couple of assignments, which I haven't yet carried out, and I hope to do that in the next few days. But you know, if you know of anyone, please let Diana or Steve know so that some action can be quickly taken to try to close that gap. Because that's one of the promises we made to people. We said, we think this is a wonderful project and it's going to be great for the library, great for all of our patrons through the next many years. But we're not going to use library funds to do it. We're going to do it with fundraising and grant making, and we've done a terrific job of that. But we got a little ways to go. Thank you.
Any other comments, please? Okay, thank you. I believe we're ready to have a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second?
Second.
Adjourned.